Hello. Okay, wait, let me see. I don't know why my camera's not working. Can you see me?
Oh, now I can.
There we can. I feel like such a fangirl to me when this is like a huge moment for me. Just have I tell people that you remind me a lot of when you listen to Brene Brown speak, and she is so articulate in a way that just illuminates your whole body, and that is you when
Ah,
you deliver information in the most empowering, like succinct, beautiful way
oh,
that I
thank you.
your
That's
vision.
well, that's how you sing. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
you're amazing. I love listening to your music. I just was listening to Woman and it's a wonderful song. It's very cool. Amazing. You have an amazing gift for lyrics. And are you composing these songs? They're
Yes.
yours. Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible. And you have
Well,
an amazing voice.
oh, I'm not kidding. I wrote that song because of things that you taught. Like Woman
Wow.
was written when I was like I explain also in the email, but I wrote the song after I had heard you speak about the fact that like sex is not a dirty thing. And
Yeah.
especially this is what I think is so beautiful. Doctrinally, as Latter-day Saints, we're like, yeah, of course it's not. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's creation, it's this like culmination and like sacredness and almost like a sacrament. It's like a
Yeah.
purifying thing, but our culture has taught it in
Has
a
a
way.
harder time. Yes.
Yes. And so when
Uh-huh.
think about that, I the song Woman to me was like, yeah, we have this sexual awakening and we label it as dirty, but just like birth is dirty, or just like
Mm-hmm.
anything that's dead and coming alive is
Yeah. I
dirty.
love that you unearthed me, right? Because
Yeah.
I think there's just, oh, there's a lot of meanings in it that I think are really right on point, which is that, first of all, I think women are kind of sensual, earthy
Yeah.
creatures. I mean, I think
Yes.
that scares some of us, right? But I do
Yes.
think that we are very sensual beings,
Yes.
and there is something kind of naturally erotic about the feminine. And I think we're afraid of that idea. I don't think we should be, but I think we are. And
Oh,
I think a lot of times because we're afraid of that in our nature, we were complicit in shutting our sexuality and our creativity and our wisdom down. And I
yeah.
think Eve was the opposite of that. She was about wisdom and courage and truth, and she was stepping forward. And I think you're right that our doctrine supports this vision of woman and of embodiment.
Yes.
And I mean, I think we often focus on the wrong things, but
Oh,
that's in our theology, and it's there for us as a guiding idea that innocence is good, but it's certainly not sufficient. We have to step into the world. We have to be creative and choose and
yes.
unearth ourselves. We have to, if we're going to bring our strength to the world and to our relationships and to ourselves.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I know I already said this, but the way that you speak is just like I'm electrified. Literally today in the car with my dad, I was talking to him about this idea of exactly that, that the divine woman is a sexual being. Like I love the word sensual. Like
Yeah.
women really do have sex appeal, and
Yeah.
the way that I feel like what has been done is like, oh my gosh, we're going to teach modesty in a way that then is like shaming women for being women,
Right.
and we're going to be like, oh, be the lower law, as I was like explaining to my dad, is like, okay, be modest. So basically dress like a boy and remove yourself from any feminine energy at all. So
Right.
then we're not being lustful. But I'm like,
Right.
no, the higher law is lust,
Yeah.
but beautiful spiritual law is how can I use my sensuality as a woman to empower myself and other people to live in this like divine sphere.
Right.
And
And it's very moral in the sense that it's about creating strength and
mm,
creating goodness, right?
yes,
Like Eve stepping out of innocence is to create a better world, is to
yes,
create strength and wisdom, right?
yes,
And to procreate and all of the symbolic levels of that.
yes,
But it does take courage, and I think
Yes,
we're afraid if we wake up or we're anything other than innocent and
yes,
naive that we'll be destructive. And certainly we can be destructive. We have
yes,
to be wise with our choices and wise with our sexuality and wise with everything. But,
yeah,
the only way to do it is to step into the world and to assert choices and learn through them. And
yes.
so it takes some faith, really, some
Yeah.
courage to tolerate the process of living. Yeah.
Oh, wonder, because something that I've been pondering a lot lately is that very idea that so we're in the Garden of Eden, right? And beautiful Adam is there, like la da da, like I'm gonna be so obedient
Yeah.
and I'm following, and then meanwhile Eve is over here, and first Satan is like, let me go tempt Adam, and he's just like, no, I'm not having it. And then Satan tempts Eve, and I think what's beautiful is Eve was the one that was like, wait,
Right.
I and like her.
She's thinking through,
Yes,
right?
she's seeing this bigger picture and this like risk that needs to be taken.
Yeah.
And something that is so unique to Latter-day Saint theology is we believe Eve didn't sin. That wasn't a sin.
Yeah.
Eve,
Right.
Eve's risk and choice and empowered choice
Right.
was
An active agency. Mm-hmm.
yes. And so
Yes.
something I added in the email that I was curious about is like, okay, so some people are like, yes, it is a literal fruit that they bit and then whatever. But I
Mm.
thought, I don't know how literal it is. To me, it's almost like, did Eve have a sexual awakening to understand her sexuality? And
Yeah.
that,
Interesting
and
idea.
yeah,
Right. There's a
and
lot of metaphor, right? I mean, there's a lot of metaphor in these early stories, and they're symbolic on many levels.
yeah,
And it does represent a kind of awakening. I mean, yeah, sexual perhaps in a sense, but
yeah,
embodied awakening at a
mm,
minimum, right? It's a kind of
yeah,
stepping into living, but
yes,
there's risks in doing it. And
yeah,
the temptation is to stay back, to
yeah,
not take risks. And of course,
yes,
you don't want to be like headlong into every choice. Of course, there's
yes,
risk in that way, but to engage, to be anxiously engaged in a good cause, to create
yes.
good, that's really what I think God wants from us.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have some questions. And to kind of like finish up this thought, the thing that I've been like really sitting on lately and like pondering and feeling some friction with it is feeling like, okay, so Eve made this choice, and then Satan was like, okay, go quick, hide, you're naked, cover
Yeah,
your nakedness. And
yeah,
then also, then they were able to have children. But I love that we learned that then when God visits them in the garden, first he was like, why are you clothed? And
mm,
second was this idea that he punished Satan, but Satan was like, why are you punishing me for what was done in other worlds? Like, why am I?
mm.
And
Interesting.
that's something that I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know what that means. I know that's what we believe. And what does
mm.
that tell me? And how many things are we like, oh, that's wicked and evil when really
It
it's
just is. It is how it is. Yeah, that's
yes.
interesting.
And I've been thinking too about like the sexualization of women. Like I've been thinking lately so much about like our conversations around modesty, where
Mm.
I'm like, okay, so a woman has bearing the brunt of
Hmm.
sex
Of
for
sexuality. Hmm. Yeah,
yes,
the inherent anxiety of sexuality
yes,
and
and
exposure. I mean, I think this awareness of nakedness is a very interesting idea because I think when you kind of step out of innocence and
yeah,
into a kind of adulthood or out of innocence, right? There
yeah,
is more self-awareness,
yeah,
self-consciousness, fear, timidity, right? And that's a part of the risk of living, of being unearthed, right? Of sort of
yeah,
engaging in the world. So we become more self-aware and afraid. And
yeah,
that's, I think, a part of being awake. And
mm,
it's a part of managing our fear about our sufficiency and all that as we engage in the world. So I think that's symbolically a piece of this. There was something else you said. Oh, the modesty thing.
mm,
I think that because sexuality and intimacy and partnership, which is so much a part of living in an adult way, is
mm-hmm,
scary for us. I
yeah,
mean, to love is to risk.
Yeah.
to let somebody in on who you are is to risk, because, that's that desire to hide. And
Mm.
so I think that sometimes the way this has gotten handled, especially in cultures that have been more dominated by male narratives, is
Yeah.
to focus on the female as the problem. She exposes me. She
Yeah.
makes me feel vulnerable because I see her sexuality and her desirability. So we'll make her the problem, and
Yeah.
you see this in more fundamentalist cultures
Yeah.
where the woman is shrouded completely and her sexuality is shamed. But
Yeah.
it's about, in many ways, trying to handle an anxiety in the man. And
Ah,
so when we do that, we do both men and women a deep disservice. And, of course, we want to think about sexuality and modesty as a function of respect,
yes.
self-respect, respect for others. That all matters, but not this kind of shaming and hiding out of
Yes.
fear. Yes.
Yes. And shaming the woman and then basically de de-womanizing her.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Taking, kind of robbing her of her feminine essence and
yes.
beauty and
Yes.
strength.
Totally.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
especially in our culture, I've been thinking about this. We emphasize wearing garments as modesty, where I'm like, no, that's not why we make covenants.
Right.
Like this is
It's
the
confusing the two. Yes.
yeah, the shoulder is not wicked and evil. In fact, that's like what makes me so feminine.
Yeah.
And something that I'd love to know how you move through this. Sometimes it feels really difficult to me to want to express my femininity as a covenant woman, where I
Mm.
felt like, gosh, these garments to me don't represent modesty. I love the covenant. I love
Right.
choice, but I'm having a hard time expressing my feminine
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah, it's tricky for a lot of LDS women, this piece, because you're right, those are two different things and they often get put together.
Yes.
So there's the covenant, and then there's also the question of what does modesty mean for me, and what does it mean in our culture and in our way of dressing? Like the way we
Yes.
dress now in Utah, for example, what would be considered modest would have been be considered very immodest in the 19 at the turn of the century. I mean, the night of the turning into the 20th century. So that is to say that, that's always a changing thing. And garments have also changed in terms of the lines and so on. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there are easy answers around that, because I
Yeah.
know, a lot of the women that I work with are struggling between those two things, which is I want to be modest, but I
Yeah.
feel somewhat controlled by the lines of the garment, but I don't dismiss my covenants and they mean something to me. So I don't have great answers for it, except for women to kind of, and men, to sort out what they think is wise and best for them around some of those dilemmas. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's true. I think sometimes, certainly we can use our beauty and our embodiment to exploit or to tantalize or to go across boundaries in a way that's not loving, not decent, not fair. But there's
Totally.
also a distinction between that and shrouding ourselves and being afraid of our embodiment and
Yeah.
our inherent beauty. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially for women, like that's the thing. And because I've been thinking, and I'm so excited to talk with you, because something that I've been thinking lately in the wake of Sarah Everard, I'm mispronouncing her name, the
Oh.
woman who was murdered on her walk home in
Oh.
London.
Oh.
And yes, devastating. And feeling like there's so many stories of women who feel unsafe in scenarios. What's the answer? And as I've been pondering that, I just felt like the answer is empowering women. The
Yeah.
answer is lying in helping women understand their worth, their value, their sexuality. And to me, you're so good at doing that and empowering women to
Yeah.
understand, like, and for me it's like we believe in a heavenly mother, and I feel like, yeah, it's learning about her and her strength and her power. And
Yeah.
oftentimes women are be like, oh, you're off operating in your masculine, where I'm like, no, I'm operating in my
Mm.
divine.
Yeah.
Boundaries are divine, this strength is divine. And so few women
Yeah.
know that, and I've been taught
Right.
that.
Right. A
So
lot of people think that the way to be a good woman is to kind of push yourself down and to not be
yeah.
a threat to anyone.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a disservice, of course, to women, but it's also because I do a lot of work with couples. It's a real disservice to men too, because if a woman's not thriving, a marriage isn't thriving, right? And
Totally.
so if you want a thriving, open-hearted, passionate marriage, you have to have enough room for two people to thrive. And I think a lot of men, unfortunately for themselves, have been taught the idea that to feel like a man, you need to sort of be stronger than or be
Yes.
superior to the woman you're with.
Yes.
And really strong men don't need to do that. They can allow that radiance and strength that is
Yeah.
part of that feminine energy to thrive. So
Totally.
anyway, so it's about learning a new way of thinking about the divine feminine and divine masculine, and how that's in each of us, and how much, you know, we bring different gifts and capacities, and how much we benefit in our marriages, in our society, in our church, by letting that strength be there. And the strength
Yeah.
never harms. Strength always makes things better. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that has been so powerful to me, is just like, is like, as we elevate one, we elevate the other. And it isn't like
Yes.
uh,
No,
above.
exactly.
As we empower this one, we're both winning. And
That's
it's
right.
empowering each other to be operating in these higher, more empowered ways.
Collaborative relationships. Yes, exactly.
That I feel so passionate about. So I'm now 29. I know I look like an infant. I'm like, oh,
That's
and
a great thing.
thank you. Yeah, I'm like, the what is a youth? No, I tell people, I'm like, it's the Holy Ghost, just but it's for me, in my experience, it's been so challenging trying to find a life partner
Mm,
that doesn't feel threatened by my
mm,
expression of femininity, because it isn't subdued and like,
mhm,
oh, I'll do whatever you want. And
mhm.
the first time I had been aware of this was when you were speaking this years ago, and you talked about in marriages, especially women not understanding that they are just as, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, their pleasure is just as
Oh,
important
yeah, for
as
sure.
the husband's. And
Right.
I'd always been like, yeah, of course. And then as you were speaking, I'm like, wait, you mean people don't know that? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that women have believed this idea that our role is just to have men feel pleasure. And so I wrote in the email too about like the orgasm gap, like the female
Yeah,
orgasm gap, about how like women,
yeah,
I how
absolutely. So
for,
I think that yeah, a lot of women have grown up thinking that their sexuality exists for the sake of the man, that the
yeah.
man's really the sexual one and she's
Mhm.
not or shouldn't be. And so her sexuality is only given legitimacy if it's there in service of a man's needs.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's a typical framing. It
Yeah.
goes so badly for men and women when they frame it that way, because no woman wants to service anybody for life, much
Yeah.
less eternity. And so it breaks down very, very quickly. But I
Yes.
think a lot of times couples haven't, or even if you have a good husband or a good man who really wants you to have pleasure, a lot of times women haven't been taught that that's legitimate and okay for them. They feel like they need to be arm's length from their sexual and sensual natures because
Yeah.
they want to be good. And so
Mhm.
we need to have a wiser understanding of what good is, because as you say, in our theology, our parents in heaven are embodied. And it's
Yes.
not only not it's not only not going against our spirituality.
Yeah.
In our theology, we need it for our spiritual
Yes.
development, right?
Oh,
Yes.
oh
And yeah, and I do think that the Adam and Eve story and Eve's choice is very much symbolically that choice of
yeah.
stepping into life, stepping into choice, stepping out of the garden and into a challenging world, but a world in which we can sort of bring our wisdom and our courage and develop into
Yeah.
more godly creatures, into the divine. Hmm.
uh, our theology is the coolest.
Yeah,
But
it
like,
is.
when they don't drink from these rich waters, I'm like, oh, you're missing all the juice about like,
Yeah,
the meaning. And so
yeah.
Strong Woman to me was also about the fact that like a sexual awakening has to happen in order to
Mm,
be celestialized. We
yeah.
celestialized without this. And I love when you
Yeah.
use the word embodiment. And I also love what you said about like women oftentimes feeling like we can only be sexy in order for like the male gaze.
Yeah.
And I said it
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah.
How would you, I guess, like maybe what advice would you give a woman to help tap into that so we can tap into more creativity, like for ourselves and
Yeah, like one of the things I teach a lot is that we need to embrace our embodiment and our sexuality for our own strength. Because
mm,
if you're a house divided, to use that scriptural reference, if you're divided against yourself, if you're rejecting of the
mm,
wisdom and strength that comes from your embodiment, you're really working against your inner wisdom, right?
mm,
And so we believe this, that our bodies are a gift to us from God, but then we get a lot of cultural messages that make us not lean into that. And
yeah,
so we aren't able to be at peace in our own skin
yeah,
and to kind of reach in and know what our resources are and what our gifts are and what we are able to do and create and develop in the world. So when we're kind of running scared from ourselves,
yeah,
or we're afraid of our strength. I think a lot of women are afraid of their strength. They're afraid if they're strong that they'll be unlovable or they'll
yeah,
be a threat.
yeah, and they won't be feminine anymore.
Yes. And we
Where
need a different vision of femininity
yes,
because,
oh,
yeah, there's just so much more than that. And
uh,
so, yeah. So the wonderful thing about our theology is that it will grow, it can grow with us. It has
yeah,
so much depth. And so
yes,
even though culturally we sometimes are at a lower level, then there's
yeah,
all kinds of room for us to keep growing and tapping into this beautiful theology to understand it at a different level and to
yes,
understand more about feminine strength and
yes,
more about true divine partnership. It's all
yes.
there for us.
Oh my gosh. Oh, yes. I literally went to bed crying last night because I was talking to a boy about these things, and he just was like, I don't get it. It seems to me like like almost in a way of like, Jen, like you don't believe in truth. And I was like, one of the things was like, and I couldn't come up with a different answer, but it was genuinely like, but you're not a girl, so you don't understand what it's like to have lived a life where all of my figures are male. And
Yeah.
and our doctrine is about this like powerful heavenly mother, and we rarely talk about her. And so I'm
Yeah.
trying to embody this whole divine feminine, and my culture is like it
Yeah.
rejects that when I'm showing up in a way that I feel like is divine. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really exciting for me. Something that I've loved is like President Nelson being like, the restoration is ongoing. What's your
Yes.
role? And I'm like, cool, my role is to
Yeah.
help women.
Yeah.
And like,
That's right. As we bring our strength, we
yes,
we will come to know the divine feminine and she will become more apparent to us. And I mean,
yes,
and so it's I think being passive is not as valuable for us as
yes,
us courageously, as
yes,
President Nelson said, I can't remember how he said it, but basically the world needs women's strength, meaning we need to bring our strength and
yes,
not be apologetic because we will all be stronger for it.
a
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yeah.
And my gosh, so many more things. I would love to know how you personally tap into your feminine and how you have maybe what was a challenge for you in the beginning and kind of
Mm.
where you are now with that.
Oh, that's a good question. I have to just think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I have no prepared thoughts, but so I'll just
Yeah,
see what comes out.
I love
But
it.
when I was younger, I was always very glad I was a girl. I didn't want to be like, I know that's pretty obvious maybe, but I didn't want to be a boy. I really, really liked being a girl. I liked wearing dresses. I liked long hair. All those things mattered to me, but I felt ambivalent about women's roles because I could see that they had less power, at least in my perception of how this
Yes.
was. And so I was like, I want to be a mother. I want to be a wife. I
Yeah.
love that. I want to be a homemaker even, but I'm afraid of like the loss of status and power in it. And so
Mm,
I was kind of ambivalent. And I also felt like, well, God loves women, but he loves them maybe a little less than men. And I just sort of felt that must be true because boys had the priesthood and my dad was, a church leader. So I just sort of saw it as I know I'm loved, but just a little less.
Yeah.
And so I think that I just took up kind of an honest struggle with God about that, with my parents in heaven in a way about that, like, help me understand what's true, because can it be true that I'm worth less? And, I just, through some of that struggle, just came to know in my heart that that just wasn't true. And it was really right before I got married, because I was ambivalent about getting married because I was afraid of the loss of power. So I was almost 30 when I got married. And
Really?
yes, I
Wow.
was 2 months away from turning 30 when I got married.
Wow.
Yes.
We're soul sisters.
Yes.
I'm claiming. I'm like, you're like, no, Jen, you're crazy. Where I'm like, no, we're
Yeah, we can be soul sisters. And I'm so glad I waited that long, because it just meant I was in a position to make a really good choice. But
yes.
I guess my larger point is it took me to sort of work this out, that I was understood, that I would really be a partner, that I could legitimately claim my strength and my femininity together, that I
Mm,
could be true to myself
yes.
and my feminine nature, and not worry that I was going to be squashed or be
Yeah.
less than, or have to take a step back in my life. And so my 20s was kind of working that bit out. But
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't really think about it in this term so much, but I just feel the freedom to be true. I don't really think about it in terms of my femininity so much, but I do think I just have felt the freedom in my life to unapologetically be who I am, to
Mm,
be to bring my capacity to the world, to bring my gifts, my energy, and just be true to it, and to not apologize for it. I want to be wise and all that, not just rush into anything,
yeah.
but I think I just have learned to not apologize for who I am.
Mm,
And that's been a really freeing reality in my life. I'm really grateful for it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's well, we're really grateful for it. You change and bless so many people's lives, and part of that is because of your unapologetic presence. Like you just have
Yeah.
this, like you have this power to, I don't even know how to explain. Like you watch videos of you speak and it's like, oh, this is a woman I need to listen to. Like you carry this like strength and self-assuredness that's so inspiring and just like awe-inducing.
Thank you. That is so kind of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Just true. Okay, so I only want to take like 30 minutes, so we've just got like a couple minutes left. Is there anything else you feel like you'd love to share, like advice, or anyone who's maybe struggling to understand their, even men or women, just anyone in general feeling like we wanting to
Yeah.
understand sexual expression better, or etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the good news, is that if you question your value and your legitimacy as a person, the good news is that you just don't yet see who you are.
Mm.
And that whatever you've learned about yourself, or whatever the fears are that inform your inhibition, which is very normal and it's
Yeah,
very much a part of being human, the good
totally.
news is that it's a distortion on seeing who you are.
I
And
need to take a note.
okay, good. Yeah. And so that's encouraging, because I think, I know in my own life there have been times where I've really doubted myself or questioned my worth or felt inferior. And it always is helpful to kind of know I'm in a distortion, and that my parents in heaven know better and they can see better, and I can kind of lean on that reality,
Yeah.
or have faith in it, or try to. And so the reason why I say the good news is that it's okay to not be clear about who you are,
Yeah.
but in a way reaching for a higher view of your potential and your capacity and what's possible, especially if you've come out of a family or a reality that's led you to question your value. So to kind
Yeah.
of look for a higher possibility for yourself. That takes tremendous courage. I mean, and how to say it? I'm not dismissive of the kind of courage it takes to reach for a higher view of your potential, especially when there's a lot that you don't yet know or you haven't yet developed in yourself. But
Yes.
the courage to reach for a higher possibility and to also develop your gifts, try things, learn things. Just know the imperfection of that process is valuable and
Mm,
it's virtuous, because if it's done out of courage and a desire to create good, it's good enough. That is, that as flawed as our efforts are, like I'm sure you've written songs before that you just thought, no, this isn't good and I'm going to let it. Meaning you have, well, maybe not.
yeah.
Maybe you've always written amazing songs.
Yeah.
But
Out of,
I'm just saying that's the process of creativity and development. You're going to have some things that don't go the way you want, but that
yes.
the process develops you. And
Mm,
so to trust in that process and to trust in, this, as a good thing. Sometimes we're so perfectionistic and demanding of ourselves that we shut down this this process that we all need to grow and become people capable of really loving and making a difference in the world. So, and our
right.
sexuality is part of that. That's the only thing I would add, is that your embodiment is a part of your strength. Your sexuality can
Mm,
definitely be channeled to create joy and goodness in your life and in the life of whoever you marry. And you can make a positive difference through your embodied sensual and sexual nature,
yeah.
and that we so afraid sometimes that if you acknowledge sexuality, it will be destructive, and there is so much beauty that can be created through it.
Yes. Man, this leads me to some other questions because I do think, and I'm not sure exactly what you teach in your line of work, because let me get this right. You're a psychoanalyst or
Well, I'm a therapist and a coach, so I'm a psychotherapist and a
psychotherapist?
coach. Yeah, so I have a PhD in counseling
Yeah,
psychology. Yeah, and then I teach also. Yeah.
legend.
Hmm.
And so cool. And also I feel like everything you say, I'm like, I need to write down all of this. Like, I, okay, I'll come back to that thought. The thought that I was having is like, okay, so for example, I'm a single gal, and I personally feel like, okay, I'm not into masturbation. That's not something that I feel comfortable with. I feel like there's a level of sexuality that's empowering and beautiful. And
Hmm.
then a level of pleasure and sexuality that, like I was saying, falls to me under like the lustful category.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
How, what advice would you give someone that's single that's saying, okay, to have sex, I'm waiting for this appropriate relationship that I
Hmm. Hmm.
feel good and believe in?
Yeah. So I think there's a difference between being conservative in your sexual choices or saying, I'm going to wait until marriage to be sexual, but
Oh,
my sexuality is good and I'm grateful I have it and my embodiment is a wonderful thing.
ooh,
But to fully express my sexuality, I choose to wait. Like
ooh,
that's, as long as it's your choice. I
yes,
mean, and you're saying, look, I don't deny my sexual nature, nor do I feel badly about it, but
yes,
I'm making choices around where I'm going to express it to its fullest
yes,
expression. That's not going to handicap you. That's not going to. And then in the meantime, you're going to have lots of sensual, creative energy, right?
yes,
If
totally.
you're not in a sexual relationship, but there's also a lot of creativity and energy that comes from that. And so we sometimes think of sublimation as a negative thing, but people
Ooh,
sublimate all the time. I mean, that's
yeah,
probably part of your amazing music. And so you can kind of channel your energy towards creative pursuits, towards taking on courageous things. And that's especially true if you're not shaming it, if you're not
yeah,
saying, I'm disgusting because I have these feelings, but instead asserting your choices and forging a life that you feel good about. Well, there's
yeah.
a lot of value in that.
Ooh, I love that. And correct me. Sublimation is basically taking that energy and then translating it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, like,
Exactly. Channeling it somewhere.
yeah.
Exactly.
So it's like, cool. I'm not having sex, but I wrote this song about.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
exactly. And sublimation is its most positive when it's seen as I'm making a choice. People do
Yeah,
it all the time. They get in an elevator, they see someone attractive, they'll just redirect their energy. They're not gonna, if they're like married and they don't, just redirect
Yeah.
their energy, but that's a kind of conscious sublimation
Mm,
that's appropriate and it's in line with your values and so on. So people
yeah.
do it all the time. It's not a negative thing unless it's shaming and saying I'm a bad person because I
Yeah.
have sexual feelings, where,
Yeah.
that's just part of being human.
Oh, this, or even not even human, part of being divine. I love
That's
that.
right.
Also made that clarification that I was like, God bless.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
this conversation to me feels like the beginning of more conversations that I hope other people have and feel sparked by. And
Yeah.
especially as a girl listening to you speak, it feels so empowering to be like, wow. And for anyone, I hope, like, I am a sexual being, and that is beautiful. And
Yeah.
I to understand that and understand its power and understand the power that I have in this very freeing way. And then I can make choices that feel empowering to me about my sexual expression
Yep.
and not and like I just was thinking, like, I'm excited to have daughters and then teach them that I'm like, you do have sex appeal, ladies, and let me teach you about it. Don't
Yeah.
be afraid about it, and let's talk about, like, God and the creation and the use of women and the divinity in women, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I say
Yeah.
blah, blah like
Yeah.
eight.
It's lots of conversations.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, well, Dr. Finlayson-Fife, I would love for you to tell people how they can hear more from you and how they
Sure.
can reach you and etc.
Sure. Probably the easiest way is just my website, which is my last name, Finlayson-Fife.com. And
Yeah,
then I have like a podcast archive that you can listen to me for like 100 hours if you want to. And I teach online courses for LDS couples and singles around sexuality and relationships. And so it's all there on my website. But yeah,
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
you're one of a kind, and you're just like, I feel like such a pioneer, and I hope other young people too can be like, wow, like this woman is living this empowered, beautiful, faith-filled, feminine, like all of the adjectives life. And for me too, it feels really like we're in different careers, but I feel more empowered in my career because I'm like, oh wow, like Dr. Finlayson-Fife is doing it too. Like, yeah, like we
That's
got
great.
this. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, you do beautiful work. I love it. Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
it's
That's
really impressive. So, yeah.
so nice. Okay, well, if I'm ever in Chicago, is that where you still are? Like the Chicago?
Yeah. Yeah. We're not always here. Sometimes we're in Vermont where we also have family and there's space for us there. But we're here too in Chicago right now. So during
Okay.
COVID, Vermont was a good place to be, but we're back
Oh,
now. So
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I can't wait till I can, like, because I never came up and spoke to you after you spoke when I was in New York,
Oh
but it
yeah.
resonated with me forever. So can't wait to get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for having me, Jen.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks for joining. And I know people have been asking, like, save it. The plan is to save it on my
Sure.
Instagram.
We
So
can
people,
post it on ours too. If you send us
yeah.
a copy,
Ooh,
we'll do that.
okay. Genius. Yeah, you're amazing. See you later.
Okay, great, Jen. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.